covering climate, weather, and the industrial enterprise from Penn State Meteorology. Here is Up in the Air.
Welcome to this week's spooky episode of Up in the Air. I'm Ryan Dephillips.
And I'm Logan Williams. Today we have a wide range of stories, anywhere from wildfires in California to how trees might help prevent flood losses. But first, here is Update in the Air. Over the past several years, many large-scale flooding events have devastated parts of the United States. Tropical storms Imelda, Hurricane Harvey drowned parts of Texas, and Hurricane Florence washed out parts of the Carolinas. Meanwhile, for 3 consecutive spring months in 2019, the United States set a new record for its wettest 12-month period in history. As these flooding catastrophes continue, scientists have been trying to look for the root of the problem, and they may have found a solution: trees. Trees and their root systems absorb an enormous amount of water, help prevent runoff, and create more permeable soils. Trees help save over 400 billion gallons of stormwater runoff in the continental United States every year. That is enough to cover all of Rhode Island in over a foot of water. Trees have the highest impact in preventing runoff and thus lowering the flooding threat across areas of the Southeast, New England, and the Pacific Northwest. With more and more precipitation falling across parts of the country, and with the continuing trend of urbanization, we might have to look to our tall, leafy friends in order to help us stem the increasing flooding problem.
California is ablaze with wildfires currently ravaging several parts of the state. Summertime temperatures have risen over 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s, extending the wildfire season later into fall each year on average. As the Santa Ana winds from the western slopes of the Sierra Mountains develop this time of year, drier vegetation from summer is becoming more susceptible to burn. In recent years, California fires have become larger, more destructive, and more frequent. Compared to the 1970s, summertimes today across the state have experienced 8 times more acres burned. Not only that, with the fire season, which lasts before winter precipitation dampens the vegetation, it has increased by a whopping 75 days. It's undeniable that climate changes are rapidly occurring in California, and with global climate change projected to worsen, so may the states.
When you mention climate change, the images that are evoked in most people's minds would likely be devastating wildfires or rising oceans. But instead, Colorado State University's Hassam Mahmoud thinks of bridges. Mahmoud is an associate professor in the Department of the Civil and Environmental Engineering, and he's studying the effects of a changing climate on the aging U.S. infrastructure. Mahmoud and a colleague studied over 80,000 aging bridges across the United States that were built in a style that uses several beams resting atop 2 piers. These bridges also have expansion joints that are supposed to expand when they heat up. The researchers found that many of these bridges may not be able to handle an increase in global temperatures, as rising temperatures were not thought of when these bridges were first designed. Many structures across the northern plains and northern Rockies were found particularly susceptible to an increase in heat stress-related damage. Bridges in other areas, such as the Northeast and the Southeast, were found to be less susceptible to heat stress, but more at risk for the increasing amount of rainfall and flooding that plague these areas. Mahmoud says it is important to think about the challenges posed by a changing climate now so that we can adapt to these conditions before they become too damaging.
Ever since the first civilizations arose, the composition of our atmosphere has changed. We all know about the recent negative consequences, but the Aura satellite has captured the good as well. Over the past 15 years, the satellite has given scientists data on the dynamics of air pollution and the polar ozone holes. While pollutants in India has grown, already effective environmental policies has reduced the concentration in the United States and Europe. Perhaps the greatest triumph against climate change thus far has been the reduction of the polar ozone holes, largely thanks to Aura. As scientists gather more knowledge acquired from Aura's data on ozone formation and destruction, they learned how to positively utilize it. Now that policies have reduced the ozone-destructive CFCs in our atmosphere, the ozone holes have been reduced so that less destruction is done to life on Earth. With better data, Aura's mission is to aid global governments to utilize the information for more efficient climate policy making.
Scientists in northern Russia are constantly making new discoveries about how a warming world is affecting the permafrost and other features in the nation. But as it turns out, permafrost is just the tip of the iceberg. Researchers made a chilling discovery last week as scientists found and charted several new islands inside of the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. The discovery was made after nearby glaciers melted, revealing land masses as large as 10 football fields, previously unseen to the human eye. A similar occurrence was reported as recently as last year in the Canadian Arctic. What may seem like an interesting find at first is actually quite worrying to many scientists. The continued melting of Arctic glaciers is a further sign that more needs to be done to slow the increase of Earth's average temperature. Scientists at NASA recently estimated that if all of the ice in Earth's glaciers continued to melt, the global sea level could rise by over 200 feet. Not only would this drastic change in ocean levels affect Arctic sea and wildlife, but it would also plunge many of the world's largest cities underwater. Findings such as this one serve as a reminder that it is important that all nations across the planet not give climate change the cold shoulder.
While it may be ice age to meltdown in our polar regions right now, the frequency of ice ages may be more common than you think. The city of Chicago was buried under 2 miles of ice last ice age, so the question is, will it happen again? A combination of 3 cosmic cycles and climate feedback loops ultimately affect when the Earth will have ice ages and how strong they will be. One of the cycles causes them by changing the Earth's orbit, while the other 2 shifts the Earth's axis. The 96,000-year cycle is caused by none other than the big gas giant, Jupiter. Due to its immense mass that's 4% of our solar system, Jupiter's gravity causes Earth's orbit to shift towards the gas planet and eventually away. Another cycle, occurring every 41,000 years, affects the tilt of the Earth's axis so that winters become more extreme. The final 20,000-year cycle is a wobble of the Earth's axis that occurs simultaneously as Earth's angular momentum increases, basically favoring winter seasons. However, due to several global feedback loops that warm our planet, these cycles may ultimately become trivial.
And now we go to a feature from Matt Yarosewick about warming trends.
When you think about winter, cold and snowy comes to mind. Scenes like this across the nation are frequent during the winter months each year, although studies show average winter temperatures are on the rise nationwide. I recently sat down with Kyle Imhoff, the Pennsylvania state climatologist and a researcher at Penn State University, to ask him what kind of temperature trends he is seeing on a national scale.
So over the past 30 years, there's been an increase of about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit nationally. And if you go back even farther than that, so if you go back into the late 1800s, early 1900s, it's about the same. That trend hasn't changed much, at least on a national level.
When asked if the warmer trend was directly related to greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, Kyle stated it was a factor, but not the only factor. Geographical locations can also play a role. Then I asked Kyle about the winter temperature trends he's seeing right here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so in Pennsylvania, over the past 30 years or so, we've seen an increase of about a degree Fahrenheit per century. So a couple of tenths of a degree Fahrenheit over the past 30 years or so.
The temperature trends in Pennsylvania are clear. As for average winter snowfall, that's a different story.
So it depends on where you're looking at. So a place like Erie, Pennsylvania, if you look at the trend over the past 30 or 40 years, even if you go back farther than that, they've actually seen a pretty substantial increase in their snowfall during the winter months, so December through February.
Now, Erie could be an outlier due to an increase in lake effect snow, but central and eastern Pennsylvania show slow decline in average winter snowfall. My final question to Kyle, how long will this warming trend persist?
That increased temperature trend looks like it's fairly consistent across different model projections, so we would expect to see a warming trend continue through the next few decades at least.
For Up in the Air, I'm Matthew Yarosewick.
And we're back. So with the end of October, November may bring some chillier air.
Yes, it is starting to get chilly, especially at nighttime. A couple of days ago, we had our first frost that I had to scrape off my car. So now let's toss it over to Joe with a look at how November will be starting to treat us off.
Well, Logan and Ryan, we'll get to how November is going to treat us in a bit, and we'll even see if frost is going to continue into this part of the week. But we'll start off things here with our climate info here for October 31st, the end of the month, the spookiest time of the year here. Our average high at 56 degrees and our average low 38 degrees. They're still starting to decrease from what we've been seeing in previous episodes. We haven't reached the coldest time of the year yet, but we are approaching it, so the temperatures will start to slow as they continue to get colder. But our records here are truly frightening. 81 degrees set back in 1950 and 17 degrees set back in 1988. Now, in terms of temperature, we'll see how things are going to line up for November 5th through November 11th, the first full week of November here, and the main concentration of below normal temperatures is up in the northern part of the United States, mainly concentrating here around the Great Lakes region, off of Lake Superior into the northern parts of Wisconsin, the eastern parts of Minnesota, and the northern half of Michigan, and it spreads out as you head farther south, east, and west. But the concentrations for above normal temperatures are located here down in the south, ranging around California and the southern parts of Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. And California has been seeing some wildfires recently, and these above normal temperatures may help or may increase the chances for those to intensify and for those to occur. Now, the other zone of above normal temperatures is right down here in the Florida region. This is the most intense region in the United States here, reaching all the way up from the Keys up through Miami Beach, and Orlando seems to be the cutoff for where the most intense chance for above normal temperatures is, and it tapers off as you head farther north into southern parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and the tiniest little bit of Alabama. But up into our region here in State College, we're the slight region for below normal temperatures. The northern tier has a greater chance to see below normal temperatures though. But for precipitation, it's looking a little more sporadic. Here we see a somewhat zonal flow in terms of precipitation once again for November 5th through November 11th. We'll start off with our above normal chance here in the northern part of the United States, reaching once again from the Great Lakes region across the northern part of the United States, the greatest chance over here in eastern Montana, reaching into southern parts, or I should say western parts of North Dakota, and it's even reaching into the northern parts of the Badlands region. Now our chance for below normal precipitation cutting across the central part of the United States is concentrating here over in the western part of the United States, reaching up into the Pacific Northwest, down into the Four Corners. Now the Pacific Northwest was recently declared drought-free, but these below normal precipitations might bring some of that drought back. Now down here in the Gulf Coast, this is another region of above normal precipitation ranging through most of Texas, cutting across the Mississippi Delta and into parts of Florida. But we'll return up into our area here in State College. This is another strong concentration of below normal precipitation ranging in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. State College is right on the cusp of intensities here, but we should see some degree of below normal precipitation for this time period. I mentioned the drought monitor earlier, and a lot of the zones that we've been tracking really haven't changed. Up there in the Pacific Northwest, it's drought-free. Much of northern Idaho is now experiencing the abnormally dry conditions, but down here in the Four Corners region, still seeing drought, still hasn't changed. It's really concentrating with severe drought around the middle part of the Four Corners. Once again, the southeast is also seeing the drought, and it hasn't changed, but with that above normal precipitation, we might be seeing conditions start to alleviate a little bit in the coming weeks. Now up here in the northeast, we were seeing some severe drought over here in Maryland that's recently alleviated down into moderate drought, ranging around the Chesapeake Bay and sneaking up a little bit into Pennsylvania here. And Pennsylvania is still seeing abnormally dry conditions. We thought that with the rain we were having, it would alleviate that a little bit, but it hasn't done so recently. We'll transition into the snow depth map here. Snow is starting to pack on a little bit more. We'll transition over here into the Sierra Nevadas. There's a slight little zone here of snow depth. For those of you who were with us last semester, you remember that the Sierra Nevadas were getting pounded with snow. So they're starting to see some of that snow come back, but not in the same conditions we were seeing last semester. The Northern Rockies and part of the Southern Rockies are once again experiencing snow, as you'd expect, ranging here from Montana all the way down through Wyoming and cutting off down here around the Mile High City in Colorado. And the main part of the snow here in the Northeast is in Maine, concentrating in the northern part of the state, just off Caribou in that part of the state. And here in State College, we aren't seeing any snow, thankfully, because we are still in fall. And with fall, we are tracking the fall foliage. The lowest category we see here is high color, and that's in parts of southern Pennsylvania and parts of western New York. Now the peak colors are in the Appalachian regions of Pennsylvania, cutting across the central part of Pennsylvania up into the north. Now there are regions that are seeing past peak conditions. That's mostly in upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. That's where the leaves are starting to fall off and the trees are starting to get a little bare as the temperatures get colder. Now colder temperatures are in store for us this weekend here, 48 degrees across the board. Mostly sunny conditions on Saturday and staying sunny on Sunday, but we do have a chance for frost to occur in the mornings. That's something the National Weather Service has been keeping in mind. And it's also daylight saving time, so we will be adding an hour to your sleep schedule this weekend. So for those of you guys at the desk, if you have any plans this weekend, it's certainly going to look sunny and it's going to look nice and chilly out there.
Yes, thank you, Joe. So Penn State does have a bye this weekend when it comes to football, so whether you'll be celebrating some belated Halloween parties or traveling home for the first weekend in November before things start cramming before Thanksgiving, or if you're just going to chill on campus and enjoy that extra hour of sleep, looks to be a beautiful weekend, just a little bit on the chilly side.
That's right. So hope everyone enjoyed this spooky episode of Up in the Air. Join us next week and have a great day.